As you can see by the fact that I'm using PowerPoint, live a number of different lives. Let's go ahead to, all right. And what I wanted to talk about is essentially how an anthropologist became a sculptor, and also a little bit about the materials and why I do kind of what I do. Next slide. The way I started was about, I guess, 18, 20 years ago. I have been an archaeologist as well as a cultural anthropologist and spent a lot of time with original materials, digging up 3,000-year-old pots. And one day it really occurred to me that I could do the same things as I could make a pot in the same way that the people that I was studying or the pots that I was holding, I could do this myself. And I began to realize that I began to coil pots, and I would go to sites and I would put my hands on these 10,000-year-old pots and realize that I could see where their fingers were and how they did the coils, and that they were doing it in exactly the same way I was. And it gave me a real sense of continuity and humanity. And I'd say my work in that way is a little bit about how we are all the same and the sort of universal theme there. So I started with pots, and coiling and pinching, and I started with very, very basic materials. I wanted to, I don't know if I want to say I was being a purist, but I stayed very close to something that was organic and natural. And I mostly smoke-fired my pieces with sawdust and some, I hope it's not mine. I don't have my keys on me. Somebody has their keys. Does somebody sit on their keys? Usually. Yeah, everybody pull out your keys.
Okay, good. Yeah.
Wow, I'm having every kind of technological problem we could have. Anyway, so back to ancient times of smoke firing. Let's move right along quickly before anything else happens next. Anyway, I originally worked on with smoke firing. Anyhow, next slide. Is Chris still there? Are you with me? And I also took the big step. Nobody's really talked too much about this, about trying to show my work and selling. And that's something maybe we should talk about, since that was, for me, very terrifying and confusing, I think, when I started mixing selling my work with making my work. But this was my first sale. It was at Guildhall, and it was one of these smoke-fired facial pieces. And the pieces became, next please, more and more body-like, but they stayed rather abstract. These are flat pieces. And over time, as I moved away from abstraction, next please, they also, as they had more body, they became more political. At the time, I was actually writing books about embodied space, and I had started out writing about very abstract space, architectural space, and then I started writing more about bodies and bodies making space. And interestingly enough, so that this was a piece about the young African warriors who are being, in army and being killed, and that's what this piece is. Next. This was a piece I did called A Seat at the Table, which was at the time that there were famines in Africa, and the African nations were not able to sit, quote, at the table of the UN, and that there was no decision to support them. Next. And finally, I began to explore other materials, but still on this kind of political note. This is red kimono. This is plaster and fabric and mesh, to try to see if I could get the same immediacy. With all the rattling around, one of the things I had liked about clay is it was very organic, very immediate. I could use smoke firing, I could use all earth things. But on the other hand, it had a lot of problems. I've certainly broken as many pieces as I've ever completed, and lost pieces in shows more often than I've sold them, and it's constant heartbreak. So I started in that political period of time in which fabric suddenly shows up for the first time, trying to find other substances, but none of them had the immediacy and the sort of organic quality that the ceramic had. Next. So at that point in time, I started doing more personal pieces and doing personal exploration. I swim. Anybody who knows me knows I swim. I swim a lot. I think a lot about it. So I did a whole series of swimmers. And then I tried to take the swimmers next and began to try to combine them with mesh and photographs. And this only ever got shown once. It was a figure. It's a full-size figure next, in which I was able to project every kind of water. This is water, pictures of water that I'd taken in the Arctic, Latin America, of me swimming in strange places, and was really exciting. But sadly, one of the things to our arts count that we don't have many venues where you can project onto your pieces, that it's very difficult to do it either Guildhall or Ashwag, that if you want to begin to combine things as I did here and bring different mediums together, some of them are really difficult to do. Next. I also turned my work, I was in a show, I think it was with you, Linda. At any rate, the write-up was that we weren't very feminist. And I got really, really furious. Here I am doing all these female bodies that are very organic and political, and some are male bodies, but that we somehow weren't feminist enough. And so I decided that maybe I needed to make the case more strongly, and I did a series of raku pieces in which I'm talking about women being pulled apart, being caged, being held together. Next, I think there are a few more. I turned, oh, you can't even see the, too bad. I thought about global bodies. Next. I began to make body wear. These are huge ceramic pieces that you can wear. I did a whole series of different kind of corseted pieces. These were all sort of talking about women globally, but the politics of it, the oppression, the weight. These are very heavy. The weight we carry. Next. And I then also moved away a little bit. As you can see, my palette had been pretty black and white for a very long time, and I began to fool around with color. Still using the body shape, but trying to see what color would do for me. Next. Slip and etching. I keep thinking about the body as tattooed. Those of you who know Australia, I'm originally painting. I just, every time I go to Australia, I'm really influenced. I keep thinking that all of our bodies, we can read our lives on our bodies. How do I sort of translate that into art and ceramics? So these are I'm telling you about me in these bodies. Next. I experimented with raku. We don't have enough time to talk about it. I had brought some slides, but I began to unwrap the body, peel the body, shape the body. Next. This is actually a pretty brutal piece. I never know whether to talk about it. I mean, some of the women's pieces are meant to be upsetting. She is a flayed woman, but she is being put back together. A lot of my pieces are about things being taken apart or unwrapped, but then becoming beautiful and in the whole, in the coming back together. Next. But still, as Linda knows, that body, that figure keeps coming back. I actually go to Linda's one of the classes, and I do, she does 5-minute sketches. I do 45-minute sculptures of the model. And I don't know what it's about. I don't know what they mean. If anybody in the group can explain to me what I'm doing, it's one of the enigmas. I cannot get away from sculpting these bodies. The swimmers I understood, but this was a series I called The Girls, and this was starting with one pose and trying to move the pose through different bodies to see how abstracted it could get. But the problematic figure has still been with me. Next. So, I just 2 slides. Okay, perfect. So one of the things I've recently done, because of the problematic figure, because of all the breakage, because of the political, because as you can see, I think the work has gotten more and more political and maybe more feminist, and I guess I am more worried about the world than ever, as so many of us are, all right? I've turned back to fabric and trying to talk about women age and waste and consumption. And I'm using my clothes and turning them into pieces of sculpture. This is one piece that I showed. One of the big things was that I actually used a wire hanger to show it at the last show, and I had 20 people come up to me and say I shouldn't use a wire hanger. They were so upset, and yet that was the whole point of the wire hanger, the discard, the rust. Next, and then the most recent one is this one's called Out of Time, and this is an old t-shirt of mine, and the dates here now correspond to very important political dates, the inauguration of Trump and the death of my mother, days in May, for those of you, 1968. It's a 60s piece, and it's called Out of Time, and it's a way of trying to bring together that I think our society's out of time. I think we're out of time on the planet. I'm running out of time. We are out of time in so many ways, and I want my work to try to face that. I am having a solo show in December at Ashwell Hall from the 21st to 22nd to 23rd, and I'm going to do an installation, that's why I got it, of taking all of my discarded clothes that will be there all neat. I'll make a huge closet. We're going to have mirrors, and we're going to have chairs, and I'm going to have the sculpture all around, and each piece will tell you where I wore it and why it was important and why I no longer wore it. As a statement about our consumption and our waste, but you will be invited to come in and try them on, or try on, and those that fit you, hopefully you will take away and you will reuse in some way or give to someone in some way, and so that the art, where I see the fabric and the clothes and the discarding and the whole sort of capitalist, political, personal coming together, I think that I see that as a more hopeful statement in that I can share it with you as art, and you can take that and continue the journey of that, quote, discarded piece. Thank you.
Is that 1999?
Yeah, I think 89. I'm trying to remember what, I have to go get, actually, I have so many dates on here that one of the dates is, some of it are the shootings of, one's Kennedy, one's thing, one's days in May, one is the inauguration of Trump. I think it's 1975, which has to do with the oil crisis. I was in Latin America. See, part of the thing is, too, my dates are often out of sync because I'm in Latin America during most of the mid-70s. So some of these dates have to do with the oil crisis in Latin America, the famine. But at the same time, I try to make these things look interesting and appealing and visually something you want to live with and yet think about, I guess is where I'm trying to go. Any other questions? Okay, thank you.